Hey everybody, welcome to the chapter on tops. This is an exciting day. Tops, spruce, this is awesome. We've come a long way so far. I hope you guys are really excited and happy with where you're at because this has been a lot of work. Your top should look something like this. It's probably got the shape of a dreadnought on it. Just take one of the sides, one of the halves, and like we hopefully have been doing the entire time, is feel it, flex it, you can feel how light the spruce is and how stiff it is compared to the other woods that we've messed around with so far. And more importantly, how does this sound? Sitka spruce in particular has an excellent strength to weight ratio. Most spruces do, but Sitka in particular is a little bit better than most. The only thing that I see on this piece so far is that I do see a pitch pocket. A pitch pocket is like a little piece of sap, not piece, but a little pocket of sap that has been hardened in here and is discolored. Here's that pitch pocket up close. So you can see there's a little right there. And then also there are some, you can see where the shape has changed a little bit. So you'll see some compression grains there where it's kind of getting poked down, where there's a little undulation in the grain lines there. We want to stay away from that. As we start to thin these boards down, we'll do something called candling. And I can do it here on this light, and I can kind of see through it, but not like we can when we're a little thinner. When we're a little thinner, we can see something like that much easier inside the wood, because what can happen is that we'll be planing the tops down, thicknessing the tops, and you take maybe one more pass with a plane or the sander, and something like this creeps its ugly head up. We don't want that. So we need to pay attention to this. Sitka spruce is known for having some occasional pitch pockets. If we can help it, it's also a good idea to take a look and see, is there a way around it? Can we put the outline of our guitar somewhere where this isn't sitting right in the upper or right in the lower bout, or one of the bouts, or somewhere on the top? In our case, in my case, I can take this and maybe there is a way to plane this and switch the top around so that I don't end up with this on the inside of my guitar. Most likely, if I can see it on the surface, by the time we thickness it down, it'll disappear. They're usually not very thick, but just to be safe, I might mess around and see if I can find a different way to orient the top of my guitar onto this to get rid of that from even having a chance of coming through. The tops, much like the backs, are going to get joined by planing them. So we are going to book match them, put them onto the shooting board, and take a couple passes, and hopefully we can get there pretty quickly. Now I can see exactly why they did what they did when they put this outline on here. So it looks like just for the sake of the pattern, it does look better this way. But if you can see here, I do have some run out going out this way, all along here. So what I can do is come over here a little bit, maybe a 1/4 inch or so, maybe a 1/2 inch, wherever that leads me, and shoot all the way to that corner and re-straighten these lines out, change the orientation of how the center line matches up, and then I'm going to flip it so that my lower bout is down here rather than the way they have it drawn. So all this is really to get around this pitch bucket. So I'm glad that's in here so we can work through that together. And I want to look all the way down it and try to follow that grain line. And they look pretty straight when you're just looking at them, but when you put a straight edge on them, you can see how much they wander. So it'll wander back and forth out of the joint, but for the most part, we are going to be getting long grain on our joint if I cut it this way. As you're following this down, your eyes are going to kind of cross and glaze over because it is hard to follow. But if you look down it, it's much easier. I'm using a mechanical pencil for this. There's my redrawn line. We're going to lose a half inch there. So an inch width total on the top of it. But since we're flipping it, this is actually going to be the upper bout. And the upper bout's much narrower. I've got more room. This should work out fine. Before I cut this down and plane this down, I did want to touch on one thing real quick, and that is grains. So if you look at this top, and this is a gorgeous top, by the way. I mean, there's so many awesome rays and flecks coming through. This is going to have some gorgeous figure on it when it's finished. You can see through here, it's pretty consistent on grains per inch all the way across. It's pretty tight here. It opens up a little bit, gets a little tighter, opens up. And then out towards the edge, we do get pretty wide. And that is fairly typical. And it's actually not a bad thing. There are some luthiers who really like to have this wider grain on the outside edge. It does tend to be a little less stiff and a little more forgiving. So on the outer edge, that works great because that is where we want some of our movement to happen. I do like to have the tighter grains in the middle where they're going to be a little stiffer and hold up better where the most stress is because that bridge is going to be straddling that line. What you do want to look for is consistency. What you probably don't want to see is super tight, super wide open, super tight, super wide open grains. Somewhere kind of in the middle, tighter grains in the middle, and then opening up a little bit is just fine. And this is a prime example of a very nice top, excellent grain, tighter in the middle and wider on the outside. I'm going to take this and I'm going to book match it to make sure I don't mess that up. Hold it behind itself, and I'm going to take this line to the bandsaw quickly just to take off a little bit of this, and then I'm going to come back and plane it. Okay, here is my cut top, and man, it is time to replace that blade. Whew, that thing was wandering all over on me. Didn't really affect the line I want to go to. With the top, it is especially important to keep this book match as tight as you can, because if you start planing off one side more than the other on the top, it is going to stick out like crazy. You're going to see it right away when you just look at the guitar. It's going to make for a very unhappy guitar builder. So as much as I've been saying it all along, please keep your book match and keep your book match tight. This plane is set up to take very fine cuts. And I'm kind of regretting it right now. It'll be better when I get closer to that line, but it's kind of taken forever to get there. But that's a good thing when we're dealing with the top. You want to take very fine cuts. I mean, these should be the wispiest of curls that you can get. Now that I've got it close to the line, I'm going to sand that line off so it doesn't throw me off when I'm looking at the gap, because that gap is going to show up about the same darkness as that pencil line. Alright, lines look good, grain lines look good. Now what I've ended up with, as I've cut myself down to that line, is that I've got a high point in the middle. That is not what I want, and with a longer plane, that high point can kind of follow it. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to use a small block plane to get rid of this high spot in the middle. Okay. I could hear it skipping in the middle, and that's exactly what it's doing. That's fine. I know exactly where that is. Okay. Just wanted to visually check that what I'm hearing is what is happening. All right. Now when we're this close, it just does not take long to get where you want to be. And oh man, that is looking good. Yeah, let's hold it up to the light now. I think I got it. All right, super excited about that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to back off the blade and put a piece of sandpaper on there, just like we did for the backs. Okay, now I've got a perfectly flat sole. So I'm going to drop that sandpaper just over onto the sole. Some very light passes, it doesn't take much. And gosh, that did it. Yep, so we're good. Just about ready to glue this up, but I wanted to get this center seam on the camera and just how quickly that came together. So just don't be afraid to kind of start over if there's something goofy in this that you don't like and you make a decision to change the orientation and kind of start over with their from what they gave you. Because if you look, so like I said, I'm going to flip this over. Just going to flip this upside down, and now we end up like this. It's just fine. So don't sweat it. There's usually a way to come back from most things like this, or much worse. Plus, now that we had to taper it to get that new center line, we actually made our job a little bit easier by tapering this so we can use it as its own wedge inside the joining jig. I'm just setting this jig up. So I got my top in here. It's got the taper or the wedge already on it. It's a pretty extreme taper, so we're not going to have a whole lot of room to tap it into place. Really only probably an inch or so before it wants to start buckling, and we just put too much pressure on it. There's also one other method using this that you can do. So you can come in here, glue this up, and then get these edges close to each other, and then pop them down. And that will do the same thing as kind of pushing them up as that wedge. And then you want to just go along and push all your edges down. Make sure that they are nice and flat. Any high spots, push those down. Get some weight on top of it. The other thing is, before you glue this up, I would suggest washing your hands. Just dirt and oils, especially if you've been doing rosewood. There's kind of rosewood dust around. If you get that on your hands and you glue that up, you get some of that in the glue on this seam. That's going to stick out like a sore thumb. We want this seam to disappear. So everything we can do to take care that we don't get this dirty is going to be super helpful. And I am going to just leave this outline on there for now. There'll be plenty to sand and scrape off after the glue up. So I'm going to wait to sand this off and redraw the new line until after the glue up. And just to walk you through what we're doing, we are going to glue this up. Then, once that's dried, we are going to scrape it, clean it, sand it. We'll get all these pencil lines off for the old outline. Put the new outline on and get this prepared for the rosette. Then what that means is we're going to get this completely flat. So once these are joined, this face is going to get perfectly flat. We're going to plane it and sand it and get this totally cleaned up, ready to inlay the rosette. Then once the rosette is in, we'll scrape it again, we'll scrape it flat, and then flip it over, and that's when we'll start our final thicknessing and getting it ready for bracing. So that's the order of events for our top. Right now, not going to touch it as far as these lines and anything else until we get it glued and dried, and then we can start scraping. We don't need a lot. We really just want a nice film of glue on all of it. Make sure you don't miss any spots at all. And we're going to tint this like I was talking about before. I'm just going over this, trying to feel if we've got any high spots. I think we're pretty good. Yeah, that's super even. So right now the tension is holding that tight, but I do want to get some weight on it. We'll let that sit for 30 minutes, come back to it, and get that cleaned up. Yeah, it's actually been closer to an hour. Good amount of squeeze out. That's about perfect. I'm going to take it out of this clamp. You know what? Even before we clean this up, I want to take a listen to it. Just kind of get an idea where it is right now. And I'm not sure if the microphone is picking up the low notes, but that initial hit isn't even a real tight bell even. It just kind of rings out afterwards. This is going to be a good top. All right, let's clean this up.